Welcome to the All-Star Athlete Podcast, your guide to mastering the mental game and reaching your full potential. Today's sponsor is Well Traveled. Whether you're grinding through long days, pushing your limits in training, or constantly on the move, your body takes a toll. Fatigue, hectic schedules, and changing environments can weaken your immune system. Give it a boost with Well Traveled, a drink mix with clean, clinically proven ingredients for immunity and no added sugar. It's a smarter alternative to Emergen-C. Just open a packet, mix with water, and enjoy. Right now, save 25% when you use the code ALLSTAR on the Well Traveled website. That's gowelltraveled.com/discount/AllStar. Again, save 25% when you use the code ALLSTAR on their website. Stay well on the go with Well Traveled. If you've been listening to the podcast and you've found the episodes to be informative and or interesting, I encourage you to subscribe to the podcast. I will be releasing episodes weekly, so subscribing to the podcast is the best way to stay up to speed on when the new episodes are released and to make sure that you don't miss any of the content. Also, liking each episode, if you have in fact been enjoying the content, as well as leaving any questions or comments that you may have down below, also go a long way in supporting the podcast. So thank you so much for listening and enjoy the show. Today, our guest is Brandt Pfeifer. Brandt, welcome to the show.
Really happy to be here, man. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure to have you here. So if you could just start off by introducing yourself and sharing your journey through sports, which sounds like was primarily football and golf. You grew up playing multiple sports and ultimately competed at the collegiate and professional level across a number of different sports. So if you could just kind of introduce our listeners to yourself a little bit and tell us about your background playing sports.
Yeah, I grew up playing a bunch of sports. It's always been a huge aspect of my life. But yeah, after playing that magical year at Kent State, I transferred to Boulder and started working at a golf course. And golf had always been a sport I played plenty of growing up. And my grandfather gave me a great opportunity to pursue professional golf after I graduated from college. So I played 3 years of professional golf, just playing mini tours around the country, Golden State Tour out here in California. I did a Florida Elite Tour and West Florida Golf Tour. And I did Dakota's Tour too. That's a tour that happens for a couple months in the summer. Nebraska, North and South Dakota, Iowa. And it was really, really fun. But I think I attribute, who I am to these sports and the mentors and coaches that have helped guide me along the way to just molding me into the person I am today. So to this day, I'm still trying new sports and push myself as much as I can. So
yeah, you told me off the air that you're pretty competitive and that you're always kind of seeking that next big thing. You've always, enjoyed the thrill of sports and the competition and something that you've been chasing a little bit ever since you've kind of retired as a professional athlete, because you've moved on from that chapter of your life now, I think, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly, yeah. So after competing for 3 years in golf, essentially wanting to just keep that window open in my life of competing. After college football, it was, I'd say there's some patience that was involved with me just wanting to get to this end result of potentially, being the star college athlete or playing at a professional level in football. And once that door closes, you quickly realize that, okay, I want to keep doing something along those lines. You don't realize how, I think, ingrained it is in you. So yeah, golf I felt like was a natural kind of progression to keep that door open for me. And then after bouncing careers for a few years, I am now a full-time golf coach. So I'm now back kind of reciprocating everything that I feel like was given to me as an athlete. And now I can kind of return the favor a little bit as a coach. And I really, really enjoy it, seeing my athletes and my students get better and give them not only just tools to be a great golfer, but tools to be a better person as well.
Okay, cool. So it sounds like you're still kind of in the game. You're coaching now, so you're on the other side of it a little bit, but it gives you a window into that competitive side of sports.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's still, as I like to say, it fills the bucket. I have these buckets I like to kind of think about in my life, whether it's health, wealth, family, friends, that bucket for sure, that sports bucket is constantly being filled up now. What feels like sometimes there's a dip, right? Definitely the coaching helps keep that balance in my life and keeps me kind of true to who I feel like I am at my core, which is, an athlete and someone who wants to be surrounded by other athletes and just stay in the realm of sports in any way I can.
Absolutely. So let me back up a step to talk about your collegiate career. I want to dive into that a little bit and kind of talk about your experience as a football player specifically. So you mentioned to me that you played Division I football at Kent State as a linebacker, and you said that it was one of the best teams in the school's history, if not the best team in the school history. So specifically, what was that like for you? But what was the mental side of that, like competing for you at that high level?
Yeah, so it was the best team in Kent State's school history. And I remember when I first got to camp, getting used to the two-a-days and the whole atmosphere, the players, the regimen, etc. First time not living at home, being away from my family, it was a lot to take in. And I just remember thinking like, wow, like this team like feels really good. There is something special happening here. That's just what my gut was telling me. I didn't think too much about it during camp, because I just thought, oh, maybe that's just college atmosphere. That's like the next step. That's Division I football. Everything's taken up to this next level. But sure enough, win after win, we ended up being 11-1 that season, getting ranked in the top 25, going to the MAC championship game, and unfortunately losing in double overtime to Northern Illinois, who was also ranked at that time. And the winner of that game went on to play Florida State in the Orange Bowl that year. At that time, 2012, 2013, playoffs were obviously a lot different. Getting into good bowls were just purely off of what you're ranking. So, yeah, we ended up playing in the GoDaddy.com Bowl down in Mobile, Alabama, and that was an amazing experience. And I think for me, after that, I just felt like, that could have been like a swan song. Thinking back, I was like, that was just a little send-off for me on my college career. But getting back to your question about what was the mindset change for getting to that next level, I think a big part was just being humbled. I felt like being the best at your school, maybe in your conference, maybe in your state, you're just used to just competing at a higher level than everybody else or most people on the field in high school. So then you go to college, and whether that's any division of college, that's probably not going to be the case anymore. I mean, you have guys that have so much experience and knowledge. I felt like the biggest thing was the knowledge. I felt like some of my fellow linebackers, some of them were captains, and they just had such great awareness of the game, and they could figure out what everybody else was doing on the field at that time. And I just was like, wow, like these guys really know their stuff. Not only were they just better football players than me at that time, but they just had this experience, and I felt like that was something I was like, okay, well, I really got to start doing my homework and just get my reps in. But to really shine at that level, you have to put in a tremendous amount of work every day to just bust your ass and make a name for yourself, because they know who you are, but you're starting at like a clean slate. You have to earn your spot every day, especially as a freshman. It's very rare for a freshman to make the starting squad or the travel squad. So I think for me, it was like, everything's turned up a notch. So it was just, I think, trying to adapt and don't lose my confidence, take your medicine and bust your butt every single day. But it was fun. It just, we'll get to some of this later, but a lot of the patience aspect reflecting on it now, my patience wasn't there. I was too, I think, goal driven, wanting to just let me get to D1 level. Let me start at the D1 level. Let me do this. It was the process I feel like I overlooked, and it's the process today that I have come to appreciate.
So you were really confident going into that experience at Kent State, but it challenged you both mentally and physically, I'm sure, to prepare a little bit more and understand that you had a lot of room for growth, and you were maybe kind of skipping over those steps to improve yourself. Because before, at the younger level, and this is generally true for people that advance, no matter what sport, no matter what level, in order to advance to the next level, usually you're like the best player on your previous team. So if you go from high school to college, usually you were the best high school player. And then if you go from college to the pros, usually you were the best college player. Mm-hmm. So you were probably always the best football player. And then you arrived at Kent State and all of a sudden you weren't the best anymore. So that was probably a little bit of a wake-up call for you, a little bit mentally and physically challenging to improve yourself and to prove yourself to yourself and to your teammates and to your coaches that you belonged there.
Absolutely. I remember when I was being recruited by Kent State, and I really had no idea what Kent State even was.
Where is Kent State exactly at? Because I don't know, and probably our listeners don't either.
Yeah, Kent State is just south of Cleveland, Ohio, and it's in the Mid-American Conference, the MAC. So a lot of people are familiar with MACtion. People love those Tuesday, Wednesday night games that they post. They start playing later in the season, and it's very well known for having great coaches come through the MAC. It seems to be a stepping stone for phenomenal coaches climbing the ranks, and also it's where a lot of overlooked football players have played as well. They got overlooked in high school and they end up in a MAC school. They shine. Kent has an amazing alumni base. Julian Edelman, Antonio Gates, James Harrison, Joshua Cribbs. And then you can talk about coaches like Nick Saban, Lou Holtz, Jack Lambert. So it's a pretty phenomenal alumni base.
So after you played at Kent State for 1 year, you transferred to Boulder. Mm-hmm. Was that for football as well, or was that a golf chapter of your career?
Football was definitely on my mind, but I made the decision to not play anymore. I felt like I'd always been a very versatile athlete, and I always wanted to do so much more than just football. And I think that's what led me to stop playing football. Was I felt like there was just so many other worlds out there I wanted to explore. And then going to Boulder, you have the mountains, you have skiing, and so many things to do outside other than a sport. So I felt like, I'm done with football, and I joined a fraternity out there, and then started skiing every weekend, and I actually played a lot of hockey too. I played a bunch of intramural hockey as well, and that was super fun because I grew up playing a bunch of pond hockey in Chicago. But while I was out there, I started working on a golf course, Colorado National. Shout out Colorado National. Great course. I really want to go back and play it actually. But started playing at a course, and I thought, you know what, I got a pretty solid golf game. And of course, you're naive in the fact that, I could, if I put enough time in, I could play on the tours, And so my grandfather, I went out to visit him, and I played phenomenal. And he was like, hey, I should get you a coach. Let's go make a run at this. Let's go, tour the country and let's see if you can make it on the PGA like Jordan Spieth sort of thing. He always he always brought up Jordan Spieth because he was like, he just got paid $30 million for an AT&T logo on his bag. Like, you should do that. I'm like, oh yeah, it's so easy.
Yeah, and he's probably about the same age as you, I'm guessing.
He is, yeah. Golf was his focus his entire life.
Yeah.
And had his first PGA Tour win at 19, I think. So.
Yeah, and you were playing football at Kent State at that time.
Yeah, and then, I haven't even had much golf tournament experience and jump into that world, and that was again, another humbling thing. But
so you didn't play golf collegiately. You didn't transfer to Boulder for the golf team. You transferred just for a new experience. You were retired sort of officially or unofficially from collegiate football at the time. You wanted a different life experience, so you transferred to Boulder, and you said you played some hockey and some, you did some skiing, some kind of outdoorsy kind of stuff, challenging yourself in different ways. I think is probably a theme that I'm learning about you, is that you love to challenge yourself and learn and grow and try all these different things that could be exciting. But you didn't play golf collegiately. You sort of, it was at this point that you had played some before, and you took that as a stepping stone. Perhaps you and your grandfather, I think you mentioned, were like, oh, like maybe we can do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly that. There was just a spark there and a belief from him that I could do it. Obviously, I had my own inner belief. I think, he basically planted that seed like right before my last semester, and I was playing some good golf at that time. And I immediately told him, I said, hey, Grandpa, that's a great idea. I love it, but realistically, I don't think I could compete at that level. I just don't have that experience. Sure, maybe I can post a decent round every now and then, but, there's scratch golfers, which are great, maybe in the top 5% of golfers, and then there's professional tour players, which are like in the golf world, like known as like a +8 or something, which means consistently they're shooting eight shots under par. It kind of goes backwards. But so anyways, I was just like, it's not a great idea. So 6 months go by, I'm still working at the golf course. I'm like, my game's getting a little bit better. And I kind of like had that in the back of my mind. I'm going to keep practicing. Let's see how good I can actually get.
Did you have a golf coach at the time, or you were just going out there and just like hitting balls? How did you learn? How did you get so good at golf?
At that time, no, like I said, I was working at Colorado National and just honing my skills. And that's probably the biggest perk of playing or working at a golf course is you get free golf.
Just playing around every day, hitting the range every day, chipping every day.
Before work, after work,
So lots of reps. Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of reps. And unfortunately, they weren't correct reps. Like I was definitely ingraining some bad habits. So the increase in skill level didn't happen in golf until I moved out to Indian Wells with my grandfather right after I graduated, which is right next to Palm Desert and Palm Springs. And I devoted my entire life to golf. And that's when we hired coaches, and I started just throwing myself in every single tournament I could, whether it's a US Open qualifier or amateur events, and then eventually some mini tour events as well. And again, a very humbling experience for at least the first year and a half. But then things started to click. I started to post some good scores. Never really broken any top 10s. I made a couple cuts, but I think what sticks with me is a lot of that mindset of going from such like a kind of a decent novice level to a professional level. It took a lot of work, 7 days a week for a couple years, really. I mean, I wasn't really taking any days off. Start my day with an hour of putting, and then an hour on the range, and then an hour of short game, and then lunch, and then play 18, and then maybe a workout. And that was a typical day. So it was just a really fun opportunity. I think more so than anything, I was just grateful for the opportunity and try something that I love, being outdoors and like, again, not letting the dream go. That was something I couldn't let it go. I couldn't shake it. The whole D1 dream to maybe professional football, I knew that dream had sailed away. I gave that up. But then there was this dream of golf. Well, I can make a living playing golf. So that was my next dream. And things always seem much better when you put it in your head. You glamorize things in your head. But when you start to put in years of work and it's a full-time job, and then you think, well, okay, if I want to continue down this path, I got to continue doing this, having this work ethic. Is that something I'm really willing to do? And then eventually it kind of got to a point where I thought, let's look for other ways to make a living.
Okay, so you did that for about 3 years, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And at the time, it was what you wanted to be doing.
100%.
Okay. Your grandfather planted the seed in your mind, but then you wanted to do it. It wasn't like you were sort of forced to do it.
Yeah, and then I called them back. I said, hey, remember that offer you told me? You said you'd get me a coach and we could take a chance? I'm like, is it still on the table? And he was like, yeah. I was like, okay, let's do it.
Okay. That's really cool that you had that opportunity. And shout out to your grandfather. I'm sure you're very grateful for him for giving you that opportunity.
Yep, Roland Casati. Rest in peace, but his legend lives on for sure.
For sure. So talk to me a little bit about football and golf are very different sports for a lot of different reasons. Namely, one is a team sport and one is a highly individual sport. And the other major thing that's coming to mind is that football is very physical and there's a big mental component to football as well. Don't get me wrong about that. But football is very much like sympathetic nervous system activation. You want to run through a wall, aggression type of a sport.
Oh, yeah.
And golf is very much at the other end of the spectrum, like super calm, very, quiet and reserved. Obviously, there's some excitement in golf and there's some, sympathetic nervous system activation there that you have to fight in order to stay calm and in the moment. But those two sports are very different. So talk to me about the mental shift of going from playing a sport like football to going to playing a sport like golf.
That's a great question. The approach, my intensity in football didn't, it could be translated, I guess, to my golf career in some respects, maybe with my drive to practice, my drive to get better. But if I get frustrated on the football field, I could kind of just take it out on the other team. There's really no one to take it out on the golf course. And you have to manage your emotions. You have to find new ways to let that energy flow through you. There's so many different coping methods, and I'm sure you'll hear every professional golfer is going to have his own little trick to dealing with these emotions that run so high and then the highs and lows on the golf course. So, but I think a lot of it, as far as like the coaching aspect, I felt like the coaching aspect was really different from football to golf. So, in football, if I mess up, I'm going to hear from my coach. He's gonna tear me a new one. But if
immediately in front of the team, probably, and or before or after practice or the game.
Yeah, if I'm late to practice, I'm running sprints, or I'm doing up downs, or maybe I miss playing time, and so there's like severe consequences to messing up or not committing to the team. So I feel like in a way it's actually easier to be kind of plugged into the system in football because you're not creating the schedule. You got to show up and basically show up and shut up. Like you got to get to work. You show up, you get to work.
Yeah. You're following the schedule that's created by the coaching staff. You're following the game plan that's created by the coaching staff. Depending on what level you're playing at, you're probably following the diet and nutrition plan provided to you by the coaching staff. Mm-hmm. Whereas with golf, it's the complete opposite.
Yeah. And it was like, especially at that level of golf, the mini tour level, it's like it all falls on me. I have to create my schedule. I have to be accountable for myself. And if I'm messing up and I'm slacking, I have to be disciplined enough to just crack the whip on myself. And granted, you can build a great team around you. And I think that does get overlooked in the golf world, how many people are actually on a player's team. Obviously, the caddy is an easy one to think about, but then you have their golf coach, and then they have their mental coach, family and friends supporting them.
Probably personal trainer, nutritionist, physical therapist, these sorts of things. I mean, yeah, you're right. And like I think tennis players also come to mind as well when you're thinking about like individual sport, but they obviously have a team around them, but not so much a team in the sense that you have like teammates that you're playing with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not like they're all working together for one goal. I mean, I guess you could say they are, but they have their own world still. In football, like we're all in this world together. Like we all win together, we all lose together. In the golf world, maybe there's a really small circle, like the caddy and the player and someone's agent. That they actually have the benefits and the ups and the downs that really resonate. There's that part of the differences between football.
Yeah, so we were just talking about like what was the biggest mental adjustment going from a team sport like football to golf.
Yeah. So I'd probably say just the overall self-discipline and how everything falls on my shoulders in golf. And that's tough because throughout your round, you're going to have these times, where things are going to go south, and you have to really stay within yourself to manage your emotions and to stay present. So a lot of that for me was foreign because, as I mentioned, my experience in tournament play was very limited before I ever played professional golf. So a lot of it was trial and error. And I felt like I didn't really get a good grip on that until maybe a year or two in, after I've played a couple dozen tournaments and I knew how to control my emotions through the highs and the lows.
Okay, cool. Let's move forward here. I want to take a moment to ask you if you're comfortable sharing your social media with our listeners, if you have any social media platforms that you're on, so that people can reach out to you if they have any questions about your journey, or if you have any products or services that you want to promote. The floor is sort of open. I know you said you're a golf coach right now, so obviously feel free to drop that platform on here if anybody is interested in finding out about Brandt's career, past or present. Do you have any socials that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I've got two Instagrams, one for my personal account. That's going to be at Brandt Pfeifer. And then my artist page is at Brandt Everest. Then my website for golf coaching is golflessonssd.com. And that's, local to the San Diego area. I teach full-time at Sorrento Canyon. And I've also got a private indoor studio too. So meet indoors or outdoors, got all the bells and whistles. But I can also do stuff remote too. Like if you want to send me videos, and I could always analyze the videos, send them back to you, let you know what's going on with your swing, and give you some drills to work on and some mental tips. You can always go that route as well. So, yeah.
Okay.
Feel free to reach out.
Yeah, fantastic. I'll put all the details in the show notes so that way people have the exact links to reach all your pages.
Perfect.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So let's move forward with talking about mental performance, right? Because that's kind of the meat of what we're here to talk about today. You've mentioned to me previously off the air, talking about like patience and how that's been a struggle for you, kind of being destination or ego oriented. There's different terms for the same thing, but patience has been a struggle for you in your athletic progression. So how did that impact your mindset, and what have you learned about managing expectations and staying present as opposed to worrying about the future?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the patience, I think when talking about the patience, it's more so about, like not being in a hurry to just accomplish the next best thing in my sports career. In high school, I felt like I was a little bit more patient in high school because I was definitely I think you grow up playing with these kids since you were in third or fourth grade. And so you really, I think when you're coming down that final lap, junior, senior year, you start to really, I think, get a good awareness of, hey, this is high school football, and I'm not ever going to be able to play with this group of guys ever again. But then I was obviously very focused on Division I, playing at the Division I level. That's really all I had my sights set on. And I just wanted to be a Division I football player. I didn't want to settle for anything less. And then when I got there, I almost felt like, oh man, like is football even in my future? So if I could go back now, I would love to play a full 4 years, but it's hard to say in hindsight. I just feel like I overlooked how much sports really was part of my identity. And I remember when I was considering quitting football and transferring, I didn't quite know if maybe I was going to pick it up again at Boulder. But my mom was telling me, Brandt, I don't think you really know what you're doing. Like, I don't think you realize how much sports means to you. And how are you going to fill the rest of your time? So she kind of just hinted like, moms always know best basically, but you're a kid. I'm not, I know what's best for me. Let me just move on. I'm over football. Let me go to Boulder. Let me ski. That was kind of just my mindset. But looking back now, I just feel like, you kick yourself a little bit and you forget how good you had it. Being able to play sports is a blessing. And to just throw that away because, maybe I don't have to play. It's not my only way out in life, right? So, then that's a whole thing, rabbit hole I can go down, and kind of what fuels someone's desire to play. Maybe we can touch on that later. But yeah, it's a blessing to be able to play sports. And I just feel like I wasn't grateful for that blessing to be able to play. And now I would give everything to be able to be back in those shoes when I was 19, 20 years old, to be able to put on my pads again and play and just enjoy the process and not think about what's next. Where is this going to get me? What can I achieve from this? More so, let's just have fun. You love the sport, right? Enjoy every day, compete. Yeah, it's tough and it's a grind and you're putting in 40 plus hours a week with your team, but like I said, it's a blessing. If you have sports, you know that everything else in your pyramid is basically taken care of, right? Sports comes last, I feel like, or it's one of the later things once all your other needs are met. So yeah, and then same thing with golf. I felt like my time had come and I achieved what I wanted to achieve. I had played X amount of pro events and I felt like I was a very solid golfer because of it. And I didn't necessarily want to keep rising to the top, maybe make the tour, go to Q school, go to, I don't even know what they call it now. The minor, the tour under the PGA.
I think it's like the Corn Ferry Tour is one of them.
Yeah. It was web.com. And
web.com, Corn Ferry. I think there's like the Canadian Tour. There's a few of them, I think, that are like feeder
then
leagues.
You can obviously do like European Tour and the Asia Tour.
And then depending on how you view the Live Golf Tour, whether they're
Live.
1A and 1B or whatever, both the PGA and Live probably feel like they're the 1A relative to the other one, but yeah.
Oh, don't get me started on Live. I love Live.
Oh, okay. There's some drama there for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I might get some haters out of this by going on the Live train, but no, I love PGA too, and I think it's fair game. Listen, if you want to start a tour and recruit the best players, I mean, people just get salty because it's Saudi backed. I'm like, your T-shirt's probably Saudi backed, so know what I mean? Like, it's it's cool. No, I love that. I love watching. It's a little bit more exciting, watching the Live. I like the format with the teams. Golf players are always like, oh, I love the Ryder Cup and I love the President's Cup because I get to be a part of a team. But now with Live, it's like, okay, you get to play on a team every tournament, and you get to play for yourself. So it's kind of best of both worlds.
So it sounds like you enjoyed playing football and playing golf, maybe didn't realize how much you were enjoying it at the time, and then were so fixated on kind of achieving what's next that you weren't really enjoying being in the moment of doing what you were doing. And in retrospect, sort of wish that you could go back and put yourself back in that situation again because you didn't realize how good you had it at the time. Mm-hmm. And then you had a little bit of a void, or a big void, I suppose, after, which I think is what you were alluding to when you were talking about your story with your mom earlier.
Yeah.
She was essentially saying to you, I mean, maybe I got this wrong, but correct me if I'm wrong. It sounded like your mom knew that you'd have this void when you left.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And she nailed it. And it didn't really hit me until probably after the golf. Obviously, I didn't realize the void was so heavy until after my career in golf. So yeah, I obviously felt that I had a void there, and I was like, oh, well, let me now try golf. That's my next thing with sports, is having a golf career. But I still didn't realize that without sports, I feel like a loss of identity, and I feel like there's just a huge chunk of the pie that's missing. And I didn't realize the extent of that until probably after my golf career, when I started working just a 9-to-5 in Chicago. And I went from football to skiing to playing golf all the time. I'm just all this time outside and playing sports, to then just slamming myself into a 9-to-5. And that didn't last very long. That was maybe like 8 or 9 months.
Sounds depressing. To say the least.
Yeah, that's why we're in San Diego right now.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. A lot of people work 9-to-5s, and maybe people love what they do. But
for sure,
I know for me personally, I used to work a 9-to-5 in tech, and I wasn't passionate or feeling very fulfilled doing that. I don't really work a 9-to-5 anymore. I'm a personal trainer. I kind of set my own hours, and I'm also a mental performance coach. So kind of working on the entrepreneur side there. So I definitely empathize with you of kind of feeling like you're stuck in an office working for the man, that whole rat race kind of thing. So that sounds like it was pretty difficult for you.
It was very difficult. It was exciting, and what I thought was my future forever. Just, okay, sports are behind me. Time to get serious,
Yeah, get like an adult job, quote unquote.
Yeah, like would go to Nordstrom's rack and get all the outfits and the sport coats, and then it was exciting being downtown close to my friends. There is a lot of great things that come of it, but from of what I'm used to and the environments that molded me, to then going into this opposite extreme of being around a bunch of buildings and concrete and hustle and bustle and staring at a screen a lot, and going on these coffee meetings, and it was cool for a second, and then I just felt this huge monkey on my back, and I was like, I have to get out of here.
What have I done?
What have I done? Yes. And so at this crazy time of quitting my job and figuring out that I actually at that point wanted to get into music. I met my now fiance in Chicago, and she happened to be moving to San Diego for school, and one thing led to another. COVID hit, and been in San Diego ever since. But this environment, I feel like, is much more nurturing to really who I am. This is such an outdoorsy town. I mean, there's everything to do under the sun and more, from like a sports and outdoor enthusiast point of view. So I feel like the world was just my oyster out here. And then again, one thing led to another, and became a golf coach, started picking up hours as a golf coach. And now I have a full-time golf coaching business. And so now I'm back. And through that whole kind of process of finding out that next step for me, I realized how big of a void there was inside of me, craving sports, craving competition. I'm grateful that I came to coach. I got to coaching, and I could kind of be on the other side of it now, and still obviously play pickup hockey and surf and work out and also feel that side of it too.
Yeah, so you're back in the sports world. You're just on the other side of the coin, so to speak, but you're back doing something that you're passionate about, which I think is really important. And this kind of ties into my next question, because as a golf coach, you probably deal with a couple of things that we're about to talk about right now. One being, and let me kind of finish before you jump in, but I want to talk about you personally for your athletic career when you were playing football and golf. So I want to talk about what your biggest mental hurdles were. So the biggest things that tripped you up. We obviously talked about like patience and so forth, but specifically, like, did you suffer from self-doubt, anxiety, frustration, these kind of things? And then if so, did you have any like mental performance strategies that you used in order to cope with those things? So visualization, mindfulness, self-talk. So first talk to me about like any mental hurdles that you had when you were playing football and or golf, if you had any at all.
Yeah, I feel like the biggest thing was definitely knowing that you're not the best, which might be clear and apparent to many people, but when you're like a star athlete, it could be a tough pill to swallow, especially when you're seeing guys run faster than you, who are smarter than you, who know the plays better than you, who just have all that experience. You just have to really buckle down and start putting in that work. Because one thing I was always reminding myself of in both football and golf was there's somebody else trying to do the same exact thing you're doing. And not only are they better, but they're probably putting in more work than you. So you have to know that something that kind of goes both ways. Something that was a little bit scary was that thought. I was like, wow, like there's a lot of good people, a lot of good players, and they're working really hard, and they have a great network around them, supporting them. And then there was like, oh, okay, like, any downtime I have to be putting it towards my goals, towards putting it towards my craft. So
because you know that your competition was.
Right.
So you felt like if you weren't working towards getting better, you were falling behind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I really remember thinking about that in golf because I felt like I was way more behind in the golf scheme of things than I was with football.
And you probably were, because a lot of the guys that you were competing against probably had played golf their whole life. Yeah. And you just kind of picked it up later on.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. The competitive side for sure. I had always played golf, but yeah, not to that level by any means. So I remember like going to a friend's barbecue one day downtown Chicago, and I just remember thinking like, hey, like, I'm trying to become a professional golfer here, and I'm just kind of joking with some of my friends, and I was like, there's other people out there right now putting in a bunch of work. Every moment, kind of in my mind, should be spent towards getting better at golf. So I know that's kind of unrealistic. Like, you need to find balance. You need to have a healthy balance in your life to be efficient with your craft. But yeah, that was just sometimes I would think about that. Like, oh, I'm here with my friends during a barbecue. I could be out getting better because I can't waste time. I can't afford to, miss days on the range or even a couple days. I have to, I got to get out there. I got to keep honing my craft. So that was kind of a little bit of a putting myself through some pressure and forcing myself to have that mindset. Nobody else was doing that. It was just my own thought.
Yeah, so I heard kind of two main things there. The first was being humbled. So, and these two ideas are really tied together. So a little theme here. The first was being humbled. So you got to the college or the professional level, and everybody that you're playing with is just so good. Probably in a lot of cases better than you. And then that also led into the second part, which is comparison mindset, which is where you're comparing yourself and your life and your hours and your day and your journey to other people. It sounds like you struggled a little bit with those concepts, both individually.
Sure. Yeah.
How did you cope with that? Did you have any coping strategies? Did you use any mental strategies to stay focused or help you perform better in competition or during practice, or even when you're at the barbecue? Like, did you calm yourself down in any way and reassure yourself? Did you use any strategies?
Yeah, there is a routine I had every morning, and I still kind of have that routine, just like many people have their morning routines to kind of set their mind up for the day, their body, set their mind, their body, and their soul up for the day. Just think about a lot of positive affirmations, try to instill a lot of confidence in myself, read certain quotes, maybe read a book that was very supportive of my dreams, watch a hype video, watch maybe some some workout hype video, some football hype video, depending on what time, maybe a golf video. And actually at Kent State, I really learned the power of this routine and thinking about these positive affirmations before you start your day. They had this book, this giant book. It was like the Bible, but it was like our handbook, our guidebook for our team. It didn't even have plays in it. It was just this book filled with a bunch of quotes, and each section, I should have brought it, but there's each section is like it has a theme. It's like excellence, adversity, love, teamwork, et cetera, et cetera. And each little section has just all these different quotes, pulling from icons, entrepreneurs, professional athletes, businessmen, so on and so forth. And you can we would just flip to, well, during camp, what we would do, we would flip to a section. Every section, every day had a different theme. Whatever it was, the excellence theme this day. You'd open it, and then the coach would just have us read as many quotes as we can for 5 minutes. And then he'd call in a couple players, and he'd say, what was your favorite? What resonated with you? And then they would talk about it, and we kind of share some stories. And that was just kind of that was just part of that was our first meeting, 8 a.m. in the morning, right after breakfast. And I learned a lot from that coach. That was Coach Daryl Hazel. He came from Ohio State with his crew and was then the head coach at Kent State for a couple of years. And he was probably the best coach I ever had, and his philosophy was just so on point. And I think a lot of it went back to this guidebook he had of setting your mind up for the day. And he also never raised his voice one time to scold us. He'd only raise his voice to encourage us, to get us excited. So his poise was like nothing I'd ever seen before. I still haven't seen anything like it since. And like I said earlier, the MAC is a stepping stone for coaches. So he did so well there. He ended up going to Purdue. He brought most of his staff with him. And that actually, I didn't touch on this, but was a huge part of me leaving Kent and kind of ending my career. I went to Kent primarily for the coaches. I kind of had this hunch feeling that there was something special there. And I've always been a very intuitive guy. So I went to Kent, fell in love with the coaches. And believe it or not, the guy who recruited me is Marcus Freeman. Marcus Freeman is the head coach of Notre Dame. So currently the head coach of Notre Dame. And yeah, he's like one of the biggest names in college football right now.
They were just in the national championship game, right?
Correct, yeah. So Marcus was the guy who recruited me. He was our linebackers coach. So I spent like every day with Marcus for 7-8 months. And it's been cool to see his progression. And I'll continue to say this, but there's some great people and players and coaches that come out of the MAC, going from a linebackers coach at Kent State to the linebackers coach at Purdue to then defensive coordinator at Notre Dame to then getting the head coaching role. So very blessed to have learned from people like him and Daryl Hazel on just how to carry yourself as a man, how to carry yourself as a person. That's the most important thing I think that sports can do for somebody, is giving somebody the skill sets to become the best version of themselves. So yeah, going back to, your question about what methods have helped me deal with overcoming being humbled and comparing myself, I just fell back on the things that I had learned from my mentors and coaches. I think specifically at Kent, I really learned a lot. Reading these quotes in the morning, setting my mind up for the day, staying disciplined in my craft. These are all things that, don't happen overnight, but you can obviously get molded into it. So yeah, I just attribute a lot to those mentors and coaches and just that whole mindset that they instilled in me.
Well, shout out to those coaches for sure, because excellent coaches are a huge part of athletic success. For those of us that have had excellent coaches, we know who they are. And on the flip side, for those of us that have had terrible coaches, I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but I have personally, and I know a lot of our listeners have had terrible coaches as well.
It's make or break.
It really can make or break an athlete's whole career or season or game or play. So it's critical. So shout out to that coach for being positive and optimistic and instilling confidence in his players and teaching that mindfulness. I like that idea with the quotes and stuff like that. Also, positive reinforcement is a huge one. For example, only raising your voice to encourage your players as opposed to yelling at them.
Hey, don't get me wrong. He had his enforcers. He had certain coaches that would need to lay down the law, but he wasn't going to do that, right? He had his demeanor.
That wasn't part of his persona.
Right.
But I know I've personally, and I don't want to talk about this too much, had a negative coaching experience when I played soccer and ended up writing a paper about it in grad school about like the negative impacts of sort of condescending coaching behavior. So
at what stage of your life was that? Like what age?
This was varsity soccer in high school. So yeah, I don't want to get into it too much, but it's the complete opposite side of the coin where the coach is raising his voice for negative reinforcement. In other words, yelling at people or calling them out in front of the team and never really offering positive reinforcement. It was just always like sort of negative in nature.
Yeah,
so.
I feel like that stuff will fly a lot more commonly with middle school, teenage, kind of high school athletes. Because coaches, you need coaches. Like if someone's there to fill the job and they've been there for 8 years or whatever, like they kind of, one's going to really.
He played soccer at that school, so they know who he is. And yeah.
Yeah, but at the college level, like that's the stuff's just not going to fly for a while. Like it might last a season or two, but they're going to get canned pretty quickly. So.
Yeah.
But I had a similar bad experience too when I was in 6th grade. My 6th grade football coach actually. I quit football. I didn't play in 7th grade because of him. Because his way of reprimanding us was just making us run. So and at that point in my life, I was actually like a little bit chubbier. So I was like kind of like this chubbier lineman. It's like, you're making me I'm like chubby lineman. Like I had to run around. They had these lights all around the fields, and we had to run laps and laps. And it just was, just not a fun experience at all. And so I quit. I was like, this guy. He was just like a character. Like he had like a broken leg, and he was overweight himself. He was always hobbling around on his crutches. He would wear like this Blockbuster shirt. Like I think he worked at Blockbuster part time. I don't even know where this guy came from and why he was hired. But then I came back strong in 8th grade, right? And that's when I really set my focus on wanting to take my game, try and play football in college. But I don't know. I could have easily turned away. I could have easily just said, screw football, screw coaches, let me, whatever, pick up another sport or no sports at all. And like, I could have gone a completely different route. So I'm not sure really what clicked in me, but yeah.
Well, you were at a point in your athletic career where you could come back, but a lot of people don't. And I was at a point in my athletic career where I couldn't really come back from that. It was at the transition from high school to college. So if you
finished out your high school.
Yeah, I finished out playing high school soccer and then didn't go to college and, played sort of rec league or, co-ed, whatever, pick up soccer in college and stuff. But I never pursued that chapter personally.
You think maybe if you had a more nurturing coach that tried to help you play at the next level or was encouraging of that, you could have played?
Potentially. It was a challenging time in my life. I had just moved, actually. I had moved across the country, and high school sports are kind of an interesting phenomenon where, for example, the varsity coach kind of knows what his squad next year is going to look like based on the ecosystem of the teams as they are the previous year. And so you are kind of already having this idea in your mind of who all the freshmen and sophomore and juniors are, right, with the seniors moving on and graduating. So you've already got probably half your team there already because they're sophomores and juniors, and then maybe half your team is graduating. So you've already got your team, and then you've got kind of the upcoming like freshmen that are freshmen and sophomore that are going into sophomore and junior year. So they're probably going to be on the team, and then all of a sudden you have this new guy that you don't know anything about, who's moved across the country, and this is your first time seeing him. I had to like entirely prove myself in like 3 days worth of sort of tryouts for the team. So I was already kind of starting on the back foot, coming off of the bench, and didn't know the coach at all, didn't know any of the other players, and team sports are really chemistry driven. And so that was difficult for me as well. And yeah, he just didn't really build me up. Like I mentioned, he was very much on the other side of the coin as far as like building up confidence. So it was a negative experience for me, but I'm glad that you had that experience with your coach at Kent State. It sounds like that was a big reason why you went there, and then probably a big reason why you decided to not go there anymore. As much as you wish you could sort of go back and relive your college football days and maybe try and play for 4 years, I'm guessing you knew that your coach was leaving at the end of your freshman year, and so you just decided to move on and do something else.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of referred to it as a swan song, because it just seemed like everything was telling me and nudging me to just kind of stop. If the year had been different and the coaches would have stayed, I might have stayed, because they were the main reason why I went to that school. I could have gone to plenty of other schools to play, but I chose Kent, a school I really had no idea about, But like I said, I'm very intuitive. Something felt right there, and sure enough, it ended up being the best team in school history. So my gut was right, but the coaches left, and I thought about transferring with them to Purdue. But it just didn't seem like the right fit, and so went to Boulder, and then I thought about playing there. But again, it's a lot of time, a lot of effort. Maybe we go skiing, maybe we go hiking, just focus on our studies, do some intramural hockey, do some other things, right?
I mean, your intuition was probably right there as well. Maybe it was time to hang up the cleats. You have your health. You probably didn't suffer many serious injuries. Hopefully, we didn't really talk about that, but to my knowledge, you didn't suffer any serious injuries.
Yeah, that I know of yet. Plenty of concussions.
Well,
so
but yeah, concussions for sure. I mean, we were just talking about like brain fog and dizziness and various other ailments off the air before the podcast. But my point is, like, everything happens for a reason. Yeah. Maybe you had came back and tried to play and you like tore your ACL, or you had like whatever, like who knows what else. Totally. You moved on, and
I think about that all the time. And yeah, like I said, hindsight, sure.
2020 always.
This way, that way, and I'm just grateful for where I am today.
Yeah,
I wouldn't trade where I am today for anything. So
yeah. So to that point, let's kind of talk about where you are today, because you're doing some other stuff now besides the golf coaching. So I want to talk about we've talked, a lot during this podcast about the transition from one sport to another, and how you have that competitive mindset, and how you're always kind of chasing that next big thing, which is a little bit of that ego / destination orientation, even though I know that you're finding out how to enjoy the process more now. But talk to me about a little bit more like what else you have going on. So you've got the golf coaching, and then you're also doing some other stuff too, right?
Yeah, I'm heavily involved in music. So I produce and I DJ a lot. Been focusing more on my solo career for maybe the last 2 years now. But before that, I started an event company, Loving Life Events, doing just a bunch of concerts. And I put together a Loving Life Music Festival in 2022. It was a huge undertaking of a project. I did it in downtown LA at Los Angeles Center Studios. You'll see Los Angeles Center Studios used in a bunch of commercials. I'm always like, hey, that's Los Angeles Center Studios. It's just like a place where you film car commercials and Enterprise, and you just it's a cool place. But yeah, I did it there. I had headliners like Snake Hips and Matoma, Shalou. Who'd I have? Klingande, Vanik, people like Cut Snake, DeVault. if you're into the EDM world, specifically more of the melodic EDM and house and techno, that was definitely going to be a great festival to go to. And didn't quite work out, I guess, financially. And so I had to pivot and said, you know what, I want to focus more on my solo stuff. So yeah, started producing and DJing, and I've DJed all around San Diego. I've got a good base of friends that come support me even through Fit. You know, I do events with Fit. I'll do the workout classes, the rooftop workout classes at Fit.
Like you DJ them?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Mission Beach.
Yeah. So shout out Fit Athletic Club, San Diego.
Yeah. I mean, that's what made this interview possible, right? That's the connection right there. Because I think you were speaking with some other members, and then Fuka was on here. Yeah.
Well, we both work out at, and I work at Fit Athletic Club, Little Italy specifically, but
that's the best one, by the way.
Yeah, Fit Athletic Club.
It's not a secret.
So you've DJ'd some events. We just had the New Year party recently. It was at Park Nightclub.
Yes,
what was that? Like several thousand people were at that event, I think.
I don't know about that many, but I think you guys sold or had almost like 4,000 people buy tickets for it.
Yeah.
So
you've DJ'd some pretty big events, needless to say.
Yeah, and that's been super fun. And that kind of, as I was talking about earlier, the bucket thing, the sports bucket, finding these buckets in your life, making sure they're filled up and, you know, they're not getting too empty. The DJing and the music has helped satisfy the sports bucket a lot. Working or performing in front of people, it's
the performance aspect of it for you, because when you're playing sports, you're a performer.
Yeah.
So when you're DJing,
same thing. You're an entertainer.
You're a performer.
You're performing.
So
you're entertaining people. Yeah.
So that's how that kind of translates. That's how that passion has helped to give you a purpose.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And I guess being the man in the arena, like there's so much energy when you're performing for people, whether it's in sports or you're on stage and people are just, you're setting the vibe for them and you're just filling the room with this energy that, you know, you've crafted specifically for that moment. It's really cool it's just like prepping for a game. I put in a lot of work putting my sets together, understanding who I'm playing for, crafting the set, and then I get to execute. You know, it's like game time. I seriously, I'll get pregame jitters, and I have tough time sleeping the night before, and you know, and then it all kind of happens, and it happens so quick, you know, and it's so hard to just slow yourself down in that moment and just be present, because I'm on stage for maybe an hour and a half sometimes, and luckily now I can capture a lot of it and relive them on YouTube and my, you know, Final Cut. But yeah, no, it definitely helps scratch that itch. And I think it was Shaq who does something similar. He obviously NBA player, and now he's DJ Diesel, and so he performs. He does like really heavy kind of dubstep, like thrashy or dubstep style music, and he was saying, he's like, this is the only thing that can replace the feeling I got when I was playing in the NBA, is playing for these people. And I completely agree. It's just pure energy, and it's a natural high. You know, I'm not in there for the party aspect. Yeah, sure, that's fun. You know, maybe the before and after, but when I'm there in that pocket on stage and you know, I'm setting that vibe, it's really, really cool. So I want to keep pushing for that and seeing where it takes me.
When you're performing, I know you said you kind of struggle to be in the moment, but I want to dig into this real quick just because it's so similar to playing sports. When you're performing, do you ever find yourself entering like a flow state where everything like just kind of seems to go, or do you have like blackout moments where you're just like so like immersed in it that you kind of like afterwards looking back, you're like, wow, I don't even remember that? Talk to me a little bit about that performance aspect? Are you nervous up there? Are you excited? Or like, talk to me about that.
There are definitely flow pockets, and it takes me a song or two to find that.
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes more. And depending on how the set's going, usually the set goes really well. But when I was first playing out on some bigger gigs, I was still getting a feel for like what type of music I should be playing for this type of crowd. So I feel like I didn't really find my groove and my style of performing until I had several gigs under my belt. So now that I've got a better gauge and kind of pulse on what certain venues and clubs want and what demographic likes to hear, what they want to hear, then I can find a better pocket to play in. But for sure, like, and that's the thing with DJing. Like, I think that the magic of DJing is playing the right music for the right people, but also having that awareness to pivot within your set to say, hey, look, it doesn't really seem like they're vibing with this track. Let's switch gears. And so that's probably one of the tougher things to do, because I put in so much time to my sets, and sometimes I'm like, I don't want to deviate from my plan.
Yeah.
And not every song can be a banger, you know.
You gotta have some lows to have some highs.
Right.
For sure.
But yeah, and so it's really having that awareness to read the crowd. I think that's probably the biggest skill set that you start to acquire as a DJ, is reading a crowd and reading people and tapping into that energy the best you can.
Because you can tell when the crowd is not vibing.
For sure. Yeah. And it's, man, I like, or like if I mess up a transition and then like, man, these people are like, they're like, they turn into like, the crowd turns into like an insect, basically. Lights, sounds, like they're along this cadence, and like once that cadence or that rhythm gets disrupted, maybe I mess up, which it happens. It happens. Honestly, it's rare that it won't happen at least once in a set. Okay, because we're human. I'm not a robot. It's not pre-recorded. As much as people want to bash DJs, like there's still a lot of effort that goes into making this all seamless when I'm up there.
It's a skill.
Yeah. So when you kind of disrupt that frequency, all of a sudden, like the crowd, like, you know, whether they realize it or not, like they're out of sync now. And so you're like, oh shoot, I gotta reel them back in. You know, I gotta get them back on that flow.
Yeah. That sounds fun though.
And it happens with the best DJs in the world. I was just at Countdown on New Year's Eve, and not to bag on Troy Boy. I love Troy Boy. But I was in tune. Maybe I'd say majority of the crowd doesn't even notice. But I noticed that he transitioned into a part of the song he didn't want to, and the flow is disrupted. And I could even see he did the same thing I do. Like when I mess up, I'm like, I just don't even want to look at the crowd. Because I already know. I don't have to look at him. I already know I lost him for a second.
Yeah.
Oh, shit, I lost him. Now I'm just going to pretend like everything's fine. And I'm just,
sure,
you know,
play it off.
The show must go on. And I saw him doing that. And I'm like, respect. Like, I know exactly what you're going through.
Yeah. And I mean, athletes can tell that too, right? Like when the crowd is engaged in the game versus when the crowd is not engaged in the game, big difference. And a lot of that has to do with how you're playing. If you're playing well, if your team is playing well, the crowd is super engaged. They're vibing. You know, they're up on their feet. They're celebrating a dunk or a touchdown or, you know, a shot that is 2 feet away from the cup. Versus if you're not playing well, the crowd is just like groaning and booing or whatever. You know, like they're not into it. You can easily tell. So it's the same thing with music, it sounds like, and you feed off that energy. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, it's that collective effort. Everyone's on the same page. You're feeding off of them, they're feeding off of you, and it's just building, and you just try to ride that wave the best you can, you know. And I think that's true. I haven't taken a look at that aspect as much with the whole flow part with the crowd, so much with sports, but you're absolutely right. Although I think that music is obviously a little bit more powerful with creating a vibe and kind of having that in sync with the crowd. Sports, yeah, I mean, there's totally very similar things with getting that momentum, getting the crowd engaged, and that's what's tough about like a losing team or a franchise that's on the opposite end of their championship cycle, or they can't get out of a rut, you know. But it's just like if you build it, it will come. It's such a classic saying, like, and once you start winning changes everything, right? All of a sudden you start selling out tickets and you've got this huge fan base and this momentum. So that's the power of sports and the power of music. And I think honestly at its core, that's probably why I resonate so much with both of them, is there's just so much power behind that and so much community. And it's an escape for people. They're both escapes. Like I said, I'm an entertainer, kind of, if you want to break it down to an athlete and a musician. You're just entertaining somebody, but it goes so much more than that, with just kind of rallying people together, building a community, and kind of creating that collective vibe, that collective conscious.
Yeah. Let's tie everything together now, right? So we went from sports, we went to music and your career as an athlete and as a coach, as a DJ, as a producer. So up to this point in your life, what's one piece of mental advice that you could give our listeners today based on all of your experiences so far? Mental advice, generally speaking, to be a performer, to be an athlete, to be a coach, like first thing that comes to mind, what's the biggest piece of mental advice that you would give to our listeners?
Enjoy the process, 100%. There is no end. There is no goal. That's all just something that you want to believe so that you can kind of find this satisfaction at the end of the tunnel. And then you're good, and then I've done all this and I've gotten the carrot at the end, and now I'm whole, and now I can move forward, and I'm this whole person. It just, every day is a struggle. Regardless of what predicament you're in, every day is a struggle to just live and to do your best. So when it comes to sports and music, nowadays I thrive with the stuff that's not easy. I at least enjoy the process more, and I enjoy that things are difficult, and creating these difficult scenarios for yourself in a world that tries to make things easier and easier for you all the time is really, really important. So trust that process, and just more so not even trusting it, just enjoy it. Because if you enjoy that process, I don't think there's more to it than that. Just if you love what you're doing in your process, even if they're through the highs and the lows, you got to be grateful for every aspect of it, because that's what's shaping you day in and day out. And you got to have that mental fortitude to know that what you're doing is the right path, and you're reinforcing it through this journey. So yeah, definitely enjoying the process the best you can.
Okay. So no matter what stage of your career that you're in right now, just enjoy the process. Take a step back, take that sort of third person perspective, and no matter what your current goals are, and it's good to have short and long-term goals, and the goal, for example, might be to win the championship at the end of the season, but just understand that that's just a piece of the bigger picture, and that's not going to ultimately fulfill you for the rest of your life. You need to also have some enjoyment of the process of building up to that championship, because after that, whether you win or lose, there's going to be something else. And so it sounds like what you're saying is basically enjoy the process now and as much as you can possibly throughout your career.
Absolutely. There's always going to be something else. Once you attain that, there's always something else. And so if you fall victim to trying to find that gratification through just achieving that next thing, you're going to be miserable, really. So you have to learn to love the process more than loving the outcome.
That kind of leads me into my next question, and we're close to wrapping up here, but I want to talk about athletes struggling with loss of identity following what I'll call retirement. So moving on from whatever sports they play. So this next piece of advice, hopefully from you, is both for athletes that are currently playing as well as athletes that have retired. And the question is, what piece of advice would you give to those athletes who are struggling with their identity, whether they're current or former athletes?
So I'd say for the former athletes, if you haven't realized it yet, what sports have done for you has created your character, this kind of core identity for yourself. And you might be now sad or depressed or just feeling like you're off in some sort of way because you don't have this thing that's so important to you kind of in your life anymore. Or maybe you have parts of it, but it wasn't to the extent of what it used to be. So try and recognize that if you're a former athlete. And the best thing I think you can do is find new ways to fulfill that. Like I said, the buckets. How can we fill that bucket back up? I'm not going to be able to put on my pads and go on a football field and rally with my team ever again. That's not going to happen. But, I can go surfing and the waves can humble me and I can...
As they surely will.
Yeah,
if anybody's never tried surfing.
That's why I love that sport, because it keeps you very, very humble. Just when you think you've got an edge on it, you'll have that cleanup side come through and put you in your place. But yeah, and then coaching too. Like that fills the bucket for me. Helping give back and just have that connection and seeing that progress with people. So find a way to fill that bucket back up. Find a way to be that athlete again, to feed that inner athlete. Whatever it is, it's going to be you have to do some soul searching. And honestly, I think you should try things that are new too. Like when you can overcome challenges, and let's say you want to pick up jiu-jitsu. I have a lot of buddies that pick up jiu-jitsu. It's crazy. And they ended up getting injured. They tear their their elbow or something, or their ACL. So find something where it's tough. It keeps you humble, okay? Because like I said, life is even though it's very tough, this world keeps wanting to make it easier and easier for you. So pick something that's kind of humbling, and then that way you have something to climb and enjoy that process again, right? But if it's just I go to the gym 4 days a week, it's great. I'm like, yeah, but depending on what you're doing, a lot of times it's a little bit mindless, and it's not nearly the same as playing a sport, like playing against somebody, scratching that competitive itch, right? So find something that is a little bit more geared towards what you're used to when you grew up, and how your character was developed from those sports.
So ultimately, just sort of find a way to fuel that fire,
Mm-hmm.
feed that passion that you had when you were an athlete. Find some way to do that, whether it's pursuing a new hobby, as for you it was surfing, or producing music. So for anybody, those could be it, but it may also be something totally different. So just find a way to channel that energy that was previously going into that sports, athletic, competitive bucket. That energy still needs to go somewhere when
Mm-hmm.
you retire.
Mm-hmm.
And otherwise, when you're suffering from that loss of identity, it's really going to help you to feel better about yourself if you're able to channel that energy into something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. No, that's exactly it. I'm sure you have a bunch of friends that athletes, post-athlete, a lot of the people that come on the show, struggling with this void. And they, I think, neglect how important sports were to them and how much of it is ingrained in their DNA now. Just years and years of being a part of working with coaches and teams. Now they almost, I think people just accept that they've moved on and that whole part of their life is behind them. But it's really not. It's still within them.
Still a part of them.
And you can't shake it. And they wonder why maybe they're depressed or they're feeling this or that. And you got to go back to your roots. You got to go back. I believe, I'm no therapist or psychologist, but I truly believe that from your early teens to your late teens is kind of who you are forever in a sense, right? Like the majority of your identity was crafted during those precious years of your life. And that's just going to stick with you. And for most people, they played sports during that time, right? They play most of their sports, and then when they get to college, it kind of filters out. So go back to kind of who you were during that time as a kid, and try and ignite that spark. Because if you're sitting behind a desk 40 hours a week and you're not feeling great, and you try to go to gym a couple times a week and you get into yoga, that's great, but I think there's got to be more to it. There's got to be more of that authentic playfulness and camaraderie that you need to tap into, more than just some sort of physical exercise.
Absolutely. Well, Brandt, this has been very insightful. I want to thank you for taking the time to be here today, share your experiences with our listeners. Before we wrap up, I just want to ask if there's anything else that you'd like to share about your journey, mental performance, or any lessons that you've learned about really anything at all. If there's anything left that you'd like to share.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very grateful to be here and share some of my stories. I feel like we can find a lot of different rabbit holes to go down, but maybe they'll be around too in the future. But yeah, blessed to be here, and I just hope that I could have shared some sort of wisdom and just helped anybody in any sort of little way to maybe reframe some things and to kind of tap into their best selves and become the best they can be.
That's what we're on a mission to accomplish here at the All-Star Athlete Podcast. So thank you once again for being here. And perhaps we will have another episode in the future. I'm sure there's a lot more that we could talk about. Mm-hmm. So thanks again, and I'll talk to you next time.
That sounds good, Justin. Thank you.
All right, Brandt. Bye-bye.
See ya.